Why do we work hard to solve small problems? Why do we reinvent ourselves and our clients over and over? And why are we giving away marketing strategy for free? It's time to bring home bigger paychecks. It's time to create the lifestyle we deserve and to make a greater impact. This is the Fractional CMO Show, and I'm Casey Stanton. Join me as we explore this growing industry and learn to solve bigger problems. Hey there, this is Casey, and I want to talk about what do you charge as a fractional CMO? It's a pretty important question, right? How much do you charge as a fractional chief marketing officer? Well, if you look at the market and you look on Upwork, you might find some people that are fractional CMOs and they're charging like $80 an hour. And if you read more about it, they're really a marketing agency or a marketing agency of one. Right? They're a person and they're just going to do everything. And they've kind of just like decided to call themselves a fractional CMO, but really they're not a CMO at all. They're just like a marketing team. But as you know, you can't be great at everything. You can't be great at strategy and implementation. It's just impossible. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, which are people who charge, I would think kind of wildly high rates for, marketing strategy as a consultant. I don't think it's uncommon to see marketing consultants charge 30 grand for a strategy or 50 grand for a strategy. And, it's at some level, like those prices are fine, 30 grand, 50 grand for the strategy. It's just like, how useful is that strategy? So I think we need to talk about, before we get into the pricing element, we got to talk about the quality or the size of the problem. And when I first got into marketing consulting, I read a quote, and I wish I could find it, but it was something along the lines of like, you have to charge the price at which the person believes the problem will cost to fix. That means if I charge you $1,000 for a problem that you know is significant in your business, you're going to be like, nah, like there's no way that $1,000 is going to solve it. You're the wrong person de facto, simply because you aren't charging me enough. That's all. And then on the other side, you can just like charge so much that you're kind of no longer thought about. Like you just kind of get like your proposal's thrown away because your price point is way too high. So let's talk about the size of company that we're referring to. If you're working with a multi-billion-dollar company and you're coming in and doing consulting, you're doing like a KPMG, McKinsey style, strategy. Their top management consultants who've been there and are partners or whatever, maybe they're making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year. Right? That exists. So obviously you would expect anyone who's running those projects to be charging a significant sum of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars for that, KPMG kind of strategy. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the businesses, let's just say for ease here, that are north of $1 million in revenue and under $100 million. I'd still call those SMBs, but they're not the tiny SMBs, small and medium-sized businesses. They have some number of employees, less than 100 typically. But this becomes kind of hairy, right? Like, how many employees are at Slack? Less than 100? I don't know. It's not a ton of employees at Slack, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company. So it's this kind of weird math around like how many employees versus what's the revenue and the profitability. It's kind of impossible to tell you like, oh, these are the size of companies that need a fractional CMO. I can't say to you that companies that are north of 5 million and under 100 million are perfect. I've worked with a company that was doing $50 million a year in revenue, and the CEO could hardly pay himself $100,000 a year. Think of that. $50 million a year, and he could barely squeeze out $100K in compensation for himself as the owner and CEO. It's crazy. It's crazy. So that's really important. If you work in a business like a food business, if you're the CMO for like a food business that has a lot of food costs, high costs of transaction, maybe there's a lot of logistics and shipping and gas and transportation and handling, and all those things cut away at profitability. Or if on the other side, you're selling SaaS, right? SaaS is, outside of your AWS account, your Amazon Web Services account, or your Heroku or whatever, like it's mostly profit. Maybe your biggest expense is your hosting and your Stripe 2.9%. right? So like, you first have to consider the company size that you're working with. And now we can talk about price. So what do you charge a company that's between $1 and $100 million a year? You know, with, let's say, just like on the 1 million side, they have to have like quite a bit of profitability. And on the 100 million side, they don't have to have a ton of profitability, right? As far as a percentage is concerned. I don't want to see a 50% profitability on the $1 million company if I was going to work with them, because if they don't have that level of profitability, they just don't have the money to pay you unless they're funded. And then that's a whole other thing. On the other side, $100 million a year company, if they have a 5% profit margin, hey, that's pretty killer, right? They're making $5 million a year. So any fee that you charge would be easy for them to, you know, kind of cover. Okay, so you've got these different companies. So what price do you charge? You know, some people say, I want to be the hippo. I want to be the highest paid person in the organization. Hippo. Or they say, you know, I just want to win. I just want to come in and make a sale. Kind of two opposite sides of the spectrum. Do you be someone who just makes a sale, or are you someone who's the highest paid person? You know, I don't think you have to be the highest paid person. You've got to be effective. There's plenty of money in this. So I look at this more as an effective hourly rate. That's what I want you to think of. It's how many hours you work and how much you make per hour on average. These are all the hours that you work. Not just client hours, but prep hours, sales, prospecting, everything that you're doing to run the business, the finance side, right? If you've got an assistant, if you're on payroll, what's your effective hourly rate? That's really the question here. And that's what I want you to consider. So I think a pretty standard effective hourly rate that comes into the CMOX Accelerator, a lot of folks are doing like 80, 100, 110 bucks an hour. And they don't mean to be misleading, but oftentimes on those initial calls that I have with them, you know, they say like, oh, I charge, you know, my clients 250 bucks an hour. That's great. But then they don't consider all of their unpaid labor in there. So what's the unpaid labor that a CMO might do? All the sales, all the follow-up, all like kind of the off hours time that they're working. Any additional expenses that they have. If they call themselves a fractional CMO or they have a marketing agency and they just pay out a bunch of money to other people to do the labor, you know, obviously that 250 bucks drops down. When I talk about your effective hourly rate, this is how much you take home, right? On average from the work that you do. Right? How much you're producing, like what you're taking home. Like if you're giving away 80% of that to a bunch of talent that's doing the labor for you, you're really not making that $250 an hour. You're making a number much less than that, you know? So think of your effective hourly rate and do the math right now. And I think just generally, you should just know every month, what do you bring in and how many hours a week do you work? Just consider that there's 4 weeks a month for simplicity. So what are you working? 20 days a month. How much you bringing in? How many hours a day are you working? Let's do the math. What's your effective hourly rate? If you compute it, it might come out to 25 bucks an hour, 50 bucks an hour, 80 bucks an hour, 100 bucks an hour, 200 bucks an hour, 300 bucks an hour. I don't know what it is going to be for you, right? It depends on kind of where you are in your career. If you're a full-time in-house marketing director, let's say, and maybe you do $250,000 a year, but you're working a lot of hours, I'll just do the math right now. So $250,000 a year, we'll just say that's full compensation, including benefits. By 12 months, you're doing about $21,000 a month. By 4 weeks, you're doing about $5,200 a week. And let's say that person on average works 50 hours a week. They're making $100 an hour. So 250 grand a year, making $100 an hour. That's their effective hourly rate. If you consider that they work 50 hours a week, that doesn't take into account potentially even travel time, weekend time, events that they go to, things like that. So as you can see, it's like this effective hourly rate is kind of it can be kind of sobering to see what your effective hourly rate is. I think a successful fractional chief marketing officer has an effective hourly rate, bottom $250 an hour, meaning every hour that you work, you're making $250 an hour. I think there's an upper limit to it too, which kind of approaches about $1,000 an hour. And I'm not going to say that you're going to go and fill a 50-hour work week at $1,000 an hour. That's not what you're going to do, right? You're going to have a mix of these hours. You're going to have a mix of the 250, the mix of some at like maybe 500, the mix at some like 750, maybe some at 1,000. Okay. You're going to come out in a wash. You're going to have a number. Maybe that number is going to be closer to 250. Maybe it'll be a little higher. As a fractional CMO with an assistant, I was bringing in $46,500 a month. $46,500 a month. That's $500,000 a year on a 2-man team, and I was working 30 hours a week. In the given month, I was doing about $400 an hour effective hourly rate. That's what I was able to produce. I tell you that as a benchmark. If you're calling yourself a fractional CMO and you're not bringing in $250 an hour, I don't think you're being a CMO. I think you're giving away your time for free, or you're the marketing agency that does everything for somebody, or you claim a title but don't do the labor and don't get compensated at the level for it. Whatever it is, I think you have to be doing at least $250 an hour, really, to be called a fractional chief marketing officer. Maybe you're thinking, wow, that's crazy high. And I think maybe from an outsider's perspective, it could seem kind of high, but like, honestly, think of a lawyer. When you work with a lawyer charges $300, $400 an hour. And like, that's kind of normal, right? I mean, lawyers can be expensive, but you don't need a lawyer for 40 hours a week. You don't need a lawyer for, in-house all the time. You don't need a lawyer that's always there, that's servicing you and your company, right? You just need them for when you need them. Maybe if you have a big organization, you need a lawyer 5 hours a month. Well, 5 hours a month at $400 an hour isn't bad. That's kind of the idea here. You want to provide the level of protection and service that a company needs, but not, bleed them by any means. You want to provide the highest leverage and highest return for the money that they spend. And you know that if you can be compensated to focus solely on the marketing strategy and lead the team, you can do a lot in a little bit of time. You don't need 40 or 50 hours a week to support that organization. You need 10. You need 15. You need 5. You need 2. Whatever that number is for you, for that unique organization, it would then make sense for you to be compensated well. That compensation should be a couple $100 an hour. So consider where you are and consider the delta, right? Consider that maybe right now, if you do the math and you say, I make this much a month, and that comes out to about this effective hourly rate, including travel time and everything else. Remove all of my big expenses, like, the talent that might do the work that I'm billing for as my marketing agency or whatever. When you figure out that effective hourly rate that you have, and you look at that compared to a $250 minimum or like a $400 target, how big is that gap for you? What would it be like to close that gap? What would you be able to do in life if you had that kind of revenue? What kind of problems would you have to solve? What kind of companies would you work with? Right? Hopefully that kind of gets you excited about the possibility of what you can do as a fractional CMO. I think it's incredible. And that's exactly what we help you do inside of the CMOX Accelerator. We help you get clear on who your current clients are and how to transform those relationships so that you can go from current client where you're not getting paid well to maybe cut down the hours but keep the same compensation so that you can increase your effective hourly rate. Or maybe you transform that whole client to a different kind of service package. Or maybe you have to drop that client and go find new clients. We help you figure that out, unique to you. I coach you on that. The team coaches you. We provide support on that. And then we help you build out a pipeline so that you have consistent business, so that you can choose what companies you want to work with instead of begging companies to hire you. It's just a different world that you can exist in. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cmox.co/invite, cmox.co/invite, and see if you have what it takes to be a fractional CMO. Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us for today's show. For more information and episodes, visit our site at fractionalcmoshow.com. Go ahead and punch that like and subscribe button on your favorite podcast app. It means a lot, at least to my mom.